Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much. And thank you for our wonderful speakers. Since the theme for today is about innovation, I would like to advocate for our students. Since majority of the attendees are students, no offense, okay? I can see them, you know, like trying to write notes. And here we have very interesting speeches that are really somehow tackled for policymakers and at the same time for our students. Okay, so may I kindly remind you that since yesterday, we started the live chat thing on which we receive your questions. Can you interact with that? Sorry. Are you aware of this? Please. So I will start with one of the general questions with our speakers. Meanwhile, I will be on checking all the questions received. Okay? So please, if you are going to direct a specific question to one of our speakers, just mention the names. So we have with us Bob, Dorothy, and Matthew. And just direct your question to the specific speakers if you like to do that. Or we can have a general question that can be addressed to anyone. Okay? As of yesterday's presentations that I enjoyed really with the keynotes and as well as today, I carried a very interesting message that I wrote last night. The beauty of open source is that it is a huge ecosystem of innovators who are no longer competing for scarce resources, but rather sharing knowledge with others to create new resources and opportunities for others to benefit from these resources. So like talking and like advocating for students again, Bob, you were talking about like we should not accept the web the way it is. We need to create. And now we are having students who are coming from general major like computer science, information system, computer engineering, who would be very interested to go into the theme of becoming maybe their own entrepreneurs. They start their own businesses. And the same thing with you, Ms. Dorothy, you've been talking about other talents that we have in other countries. So as policymakers here at the university, we might think about certain kind of initiatives that we can start up. And with you, Matthew, you talked about Quantrum. So is there a different kind of like maybe community that our students can like, you know, embark into it, sign up, which you said it at the end. So like, you know, how to start with all these. So can we go by one by one and we talk about this? So there will be Mike next to you. Yes? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Bob?
Okay. Hi. So for Mozilla, so we promote and advocate openness on the web. So for students to start with, it is a common misconception that we only accept volunteers who have technical backgrounds. We accept volunteers to Mozilla from any field possible. It is not true that we only accept developers or web designers. Anyone, if you can be of help to us, for Mozilla to translate to the vernacular, everything from our websites to our products. Firefox has more than 100 translated versions all throughout the world. So that is one step of becoming part of a greater movement in this free web space.
So by doing this, they will soon have their name in the board next to your name, Bob?
Yes.
In the board of Mozilla?
That's possible.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Please, Dorothy, about talent and the initiatives and all that, maybe a message carried out to our students?
Yes, I really like what Bob was just talking about because one of the speakers yesterday highlighted the fact that getting involved with an open source project is really the equivalent of writing a line on your CV, and that headhunters usually look to check which projects have you been involved with. When I was heading up an institution for training, I used to tell people that in other fields, people are looking for certificates. When it comes to technology, people are looking for which projects have you worked on, which technologies have you been exposed to, and size of team that you've been involved with. All of these things are really giving you the exposure that is going to help you to get jobs. But what I also used to emphasize is that if you are studying computer science or information sciences, you must reach out to students in other fields. You'll see that if you want to get your startup business going, you definitely need somebody who understands how to recruit talent. You'll get that in the business school. You need somebody who understands marketing. Depending on how they've divided your disciplines, that could also come from the business school. So you need people, or it could come from communications. So you need to reach out to students in other disciplines. And usually, when we have events like this, it is definitely students from the business school as well as students from tech who are involved. But then you also need the sociologist who will be able to tell you this is the profile of your clients. So this is a very interdisciplinary area. When it comes to startup, it's not just about the tech. And you have to remember this. Being friends with people from other disciplines and understanding how they think is also very important for the quality of the products that you're going to come out with.
Thank you, Dorothy.
And I actually just want to basically reinforce everything you just said. My own career, I've gotten every job I've ever had because of my open source contributions. People recognize the work I've been doing in a community. It's all very public and in the open by definition, and they were able to see that. And then every community I've ever worked in, I don't have any experience with startups per se, but every community I've ever worked in is very multidisciplinary. Yes, there's a developer-centric focus for software projects, but software is much more than just the code. There's the documentation, there's interacting with people, there's the community behind it. When you were asking the question about me and the quantum community, I was thinking, yes, there's that sign up, but there's also this big community around the QuizKit project. It's mostly concentrated on scientific researchers, just given the nature of the field, but there are people from all sorts of fields who join our public Slack channel and ask questions. I remember the other day there was a young kid, I think he said he was 12 or 13, who got on the Slack channel and introduced himself as being 12 or 13 and he wanted to learn. And that's the great thing about open source for me, is it's welcoming to everyone, and it's great for your career and your own personal growth, but it's also great for just building out skills that you may or may not have today.
Thank you very much. I believe now our audience started to interact, and we have few questions up here. So we start with Dorothy again. Yeah. So what's your opinion about having social enterprise for FOSS and innovative center instead of government agency? You talked about a center for innovation, Omani Center of Innovation. Yeah, that's why I'm sitting at the corner. You mentioned that, and I said maybe we do initiate or start up something like this at a university level. But last night during the dinner, you mentioned a very interesting thing, talking about having an open source at some kind of government curriculum at primary education. So shall we start this initiative? Is it collaboratively Ministry of Education and Ministry of Higher Education and universities, technical colleges, or how would you see we go about that?
I think that it's always good. It's very difficult when you come from outside of the context to give advice on what people should do. So to stay safe,
and
I
politically
avoid this.
correct.
But I think that we now have enough documentation of different experiences, both successes and failures, that Oman can look at to see what is feasible. So for example, getting kids to use different programming languages very young. Let me give you one experience because, as you know, I come from the UK. In the UK, the BBC Microbits was an initiative that they made sure. Does anybody here know what the microbit is? Microbit is a little device that allows you to, it's a kind of mini controller which will allow you to program so that lights light up, a few kind of movements, you know, for robotics. And the UK government put a microbit in the hands of every single 11-year-old in the UK because the price of it is quite low. It's, I bought one for the equivalent of $15 US. And children play with it and they sense that power, that no longer am I just a consumer of tech, I am producing tech. I was able, with my brain, to figure out how to let this device do this. And it really builds confidence for the kids. So we've seen that experience from the UK that you could look at. And I was just in Hong Kong in December, and I was with the Microbit founder who was working, and I've been actually visiting the schools in Hong Kong who are also using, which are also using the Microbit. And funnily enough, because I love women in tech, all the schools I've been visiting have been girls' schools to see how they have picked up the Microbit. And it's just fascinating. And the 7-year-olds, because in Hong Kong they are not obliged to use the same formula as in the UK, the 7-year-olds were telling their teachers, no more homework, let's do Microbit. You know, they just love computer programming. This is good for the future. But at the same time, I'm sorry if I take a little bit of time, at the same time, the contradiction is when you have proprietary vendors that dominate the educational system. People seem to still not understand that when a vendor gives you a discount for use within your educational system, they are basically making sure that in future, when this person grows up, they will only be comfortable using your system. So that means that we should use, we know that the basics that most people use for computing are freely available online, whether it is OpenOffice or one of the other flavors that is out there. Typing basic calculations that even most people in government, this is all that they use their computer to do. The software for this is free. It is robust, it's been tested, and to use it, the look and feel of it is just like the proprietary solution. So why are you buying it? Why are you allowing the educational system to use that solution, knowing that when that child grows up, they're only going to be comfortable with that solution? And the last thing I want to say on this is we need to be very careful. It's one of the issues that I want to see addressed in information literacy. People don't realize that gaming technology is using very sophisticated cognitive tools. They use those tools to make sure you get addicted to the game. Now what is happening is edutainment solutions, so-called educational technology, is using the same cognitive tools that create addiction within educational software. So that means that you have to have people who really understand these issues, who will vet software that is going into schools. So these are issues that too many countries are not paying enough attention to. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And you will advise that we have to start with it at a very primary level.
Yes,
yeah,
I advise that you have to start with it at a very primary level. But addressing your question, I think that every first-year student should be encouraged to find a student from another faculty and start up a business. You know, build a business plan,
yeah.
And then maybe in the second year, if they have a robust business plan, let them start with their startup. Because when it comes to doing business, the only way you learn is by doing. That's my, I mean, they can give you the theory, but once you haven't got your hands dirty, it's very difficult. I mean, I was a management consultant, And I'm a management consultant because I have had many businesses that have not worked.
Thank you very much. Now we have one question for you, Bob. It's for Mozilla. How to deliver an idea if we have an idea which we want to be implemented in Firefox? Whom to get communicated with, how to get contact and all that.
Okay, so for suggestions and ideas that you may find to be useful in future versions of any Mozilla product, the best way to get in touch with us is via the Bugzilla. So it's bugzilla.mozilla.org. So it's our system. It's like a ticketing system wherein if we have concerns, if we have problems with any of our products and services, that is the best way. Concerns will be assigned to particular teams, to particular people, so that you will get the best answer the fastest possible time.
All right. Thank you, Bob. And another question for you, Matthew. They're talking about IBM. Since once quantum becomes part of our lives, would it be necessary to replace our current telecommunication infrastructure? And what about the energy? Does it need a huge amount of it? Yeah.
So I'm always wary about speculation about the future because, there's that famous quote from Thomas Watson about, only being like 5 computers in the future. And the quantum computing is still so much in its infancy, I'm worried about making a prediction and, having egg on my face in 5 or 10 years when I'm completely wrong. But at least in my vision of the future, I don't see our current telecommunications infrastructure or our current computing infrastructure going anywhere anytime soon. The role I see for quantum computing is in specialized applications being accelerators for solving specific types of problems. So if you build a quantum computer, it might be in your data center, it might be in another building, but it's all networked using our existing telecommunications infrastructure, and you access it with an API, like a shared model, like how we deal with supercomputers today.
All right. So they are not like sector specific. I mean, like MOS can be marketed for a specific sector because you talked about energy. So like domain or sector specific.
So I think the question was about energy consumption. And I actually don't know off the top of my head how much power it consumes. I think it's way less than a large supercomputer cluster that's like on the top 500. The thing that everyone always talks about from the hardware side is the cooling being the limiting factor. Those dilution refrigerators are very expensive, and you need a supply of 2 types of liquid helium, if I remember correctly, just to make it work. So well, I don't know the energy consumption. The cooling is the limiting factor for building these devices.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, please.
The wonderful thing about his presentation is because they have given open access to the quantum computer, that means that anybody in Oman,
can
even a 15-year-old kid, could train themselves up and practice with this. And that's what I really love about it, because it isn't that necessarily today you have a use for it, but you'll be able to understand enough about the technology that you can think about how could I make this useful in Oman.
Thank you, Dorothy, for the add-up. Another question is for both of you, Matthew and Bob. You're becoming very popular. Anyways, Dorothy, you would try to avoid the politically correct questions. It's with being aware of the limited resources in the Middle East, how do you think it would be more successful if we start to use quantum computing in helping the power of cloud computing in a project with web VR would be involved in? So it is involving the 2 domains together.
So I can start talking about the quantum computing side. I think the cloud computing model and the way people will access quantum computing are basically the same thing. You can think of the quantum computer being like a cloud service. You interact with an API from someone else that builds it. My demo was all submitting things through an SDK, through an API, just like you would to any cloud provider or any other cloud service. So I think that works very well. And then as for the WebVR, I'll let him answer.
Bob?
As I was talking about, web VR and MR is the future. So this is way ahead of its time. So if we will be able to tap the resources available, especially when it comes to this huge amount of computing power, that would be awesome.
All right. Thank you very much. And another question for you, Dorothy. They're talking about which standard to be followed regarding digital transformation strategy, or if there are any steps available to help us in this regards to startup and tech initiatives.
Yes, it's the same as I said before. Any country, only you will know the full extent of your context. And one of the general principles that we have is it should be multi-stakeholder, and you should have multiple consultations so that you have a good understanding of your baseline from which you are going to do your transformation. And then you study different examples, which is why I brought both Chile. And Brazil. But India is also very interesting. But off the top of my head, I would say India would not be such an interesting strategy for Oman, given the difference in size, given the fact that the NRI, the non-resident Indians, who are all working in Silicon Valley. The last time I went to Google HQ, I did not see many white people there. They were all brown or with a few sprinkling of Chinese. So, you know, it's difficult to emulate because they have an experience which is coming directly out of Silicon Valley. So you look at the different experiences and then you see what will work. But we know that there are certain basics that now most countries have adopted. Things like open standards, it's got to be in there. Writing out your procurement rules and regulations in such a way that you encourage the use of local content, you encourage localization, and you really encourage any vendors that you contract from outside to do the full technology transfer and link it in with your educational system so that you know. I mean, I remember going to the Department of Immigration in Ghana, and I asked them, okay, show me from last year all the people who you gave work permits to in the area of tech. And how long are those work permits? Because that was going to inform me in terms of the courses that I will be offering in my institute, because you don't want to have that dependency forever. So what I would stress is study your situation in a very objective way, pulling in resources from all dimensions of the economy. Tech, as we keep saying, it's not just about tech anymore. It is about our whole social infrastructure, our whole economy.
So it is a collaborative kind of like initiative.
It has to be.
Be collaborative. So the last question will be for you, Bob. It's in which level the web VR in gaming and MR industry? Any live or current famous examples that you can share with our students?
Okay, for live examples, I do not have any particular title on top of my head right now, but you can go to the gallery created by Unity, or you can go to the WebVR website, and even onto the aframe.io website. We have examples there created by people who are not part of Mozilla. So they made use these technologies to create their own content. And we encourage people to create their own content starting now.
Thank you very much. So I believe, like, you know, talking about this, it will give us a great chance, talking about the theme of the presentation about innovators and to have startups for some students to do a business in that regards, where we're going to have like a nice market niche to start in this community, for example. I would like to thank our speaker for the wonderful talks, and I believe that, and I hope that it will help you in starting up with some nice ideas for how to shape up your career, not into depending on like current available jobs, if not, so we can be your own boss in that regards. Thank you very much. And we'll have now the break for about 25 minutes to 30 minutes, and then we'll resume with session number 6. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Becoming popular.